National Freedom Day in the United States is observed annually on February 1st to commemorate President Abraham Lincoln's signing of the Joint Resolution on February 1, 1865, which proposed the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to outlaw slavery. It honors the freedom of all citizens and the abolition of slavery.
The Freedom Day theme is freedom to learn, education is liberation, then, now, and next. And the theme is especially fitting for Mitchellville, a place, as we've shared before, where education was understood not as preparation for freedom, but as freedom itself. I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. And as I read their bio, some information about them, I just like for them to acknowledge the audience as I read about them. And the first person that I'll introduce to you is Dr. Valerie Cave. She serves as the superintendent for Allendale County School District. She's a transformational education leader. She's an Allendale County native, and she's a 1978 graduate of Allendale Fairfax High School. She began her career as a first grade teacher at Allendale Primary School and has dedicated more than 35 years to public education. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Baptist College, a Master of Education in Early Childhood Education from the University of South Carolina, and a doctorate from Walden University. She's known for leading school improvement and expanding student pathways, and she's advanced opportunities in CTE, in STEM, the arts, and remains committed to students and staff, especially their recognition and growth. Join me in welcoming Dr. Cave. It's now a pleasure to introduce Dr. Paulette R. Dillard. She's the president and CEO of Shaw University. Dr. Dillard is the 18th president of Shaw University, where she was appointed in 2018 after serving as interim president and vice president for academic affairs. She's a scientist, an educator, and a business leader, and she served as the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and an associate professor of biology. She's a 3-time HBCU graduate. She champions education as a catalyst for opportunity and community transformation. Her leadership has advanced strategic campus planning, historic renovations, and long-term development initiatives. She holds degrees from Barber Scotia College, Tennessee State University, Belmont University, and Clark Atlanta University. Welcome, Dr. Dillard. Our State Superintendent of Education, Ms. Ellen Weaver, you've heard a little bit about her, but I'm going to remind you again. She serves as South Carolina's 19th State Superintendent of Education. She was elected in November 2022. She's dedicated her career to championing educational excellence and expanding opportunity for every student across our state. She believes deeply that a strong education is the gateway to the American dream. Superintendent Weaver, thank you. And now I introduce Dr. Glenda Sheffield. She's the superintendent of Hampton County School District. Dr. Sheffield is a seasoned education leader known for driving academic improvement and organizational excellence. She previously served in multiple senior roles from the School District of Palm Beach County, including Chief Academic Officer, Instructional Superintendent, and Principal at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. Dr. Sheffield has led curriculum initiatives, expanded magnet and career-themed programs, strengthened professional learning, and overseen budgets and grants to improve student outcomes. She is committed to building a culture of continuous growth and maximizing instructional opportunities for students and adult learners across Hampton County. Join me in welcoming Dr. Sheffield. And the person who is going to guide today's conversation, it brings me honor to introduce Dr. Deborah L. Mack. She's a nationally respected scholar, cultural leader, and museum executive. Dr. Mack has dedicated her career to ensuring that history is preserved with integrity and activated with purpose. Through her leadership at the Smithsonian Institution, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Dr. Mack has helped institutions across the country confront truth, advance equity, and serve communities with all intention. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mack, who will lead today's conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, and again, welcome and thank you to everyone who's present today for this important, incredibly, actually, nationally significant occasion. And I'm really delighted that the role of education, the place of education in the creation of this historic community is recognized in an ongoing manner as well as celebrated every year. We're gathered today at Mitchellville where freedom and education were not just declared, they were intentionally designed. Formerly enslaved people made a very radical decision, radical then and radical now, that education would be compulsory. And that, as we've been hearing, that education, that freedom without education is incomplete. Today's conversation is not only about the past and the present, but I'm going to be asking opinions about the future of education and its role from our distinguished panelists, and how it informs their work and all of our work as well. So in my first question, actually I hope that Superintendent Weaver and Dr. Cave could respond to this. As part of the historical grounding, Mitchellville passed the first compulsory education in the state of South Carolina during the Civil War. Why do you believe that education was central to freedom then for formerly enslaved people, and why does it still matter today?
Well, I'll go ahead and kick us off and just say that I think back on the history of South Carolina and our country, and I think about Frederick Douglass's autobiography, Up From Slavery. And in that, he said, once you learn to read, you will be forever free. And I think that that is the grounding of everything that we do in education. Dr. Rodriguez was kind enough to share that one of my personal passions is early literacy, because I believe that if you can read, you can do anything. I tell our littles when I have a chance to visit our schools that if you can read, you have a superpower. And as we think about how that extends into the future, we know that our economy is changing almost by the minute
and higher
as
education.
Technology continues to develop.
How do you see compulsory education
are going to have to be lifelong learners if they are going to continue to be able to equip themselves with the skills that they need for the jobs of the future. And that's all grounded in literacy. And so that, to me, is one of the enduring legacies of Mitchellville, is the understanding that literacy and education is the bedrock of freedom and opportunity.
Thank you.
So when you think about education, you think about the freedom that education provides to you. I want you to go back to our enslaved people. So our enslaved people knew that the way, the passport to freedom was through education. They knew that reading was fundamental and that reading was essential, because what happens when they learn to read, that's when exploitation began against them. So it is our way out of poverty. It's our way out of bondage. It's just an essential freedom that allows us to be free. As I think about the work that I do in Allendale County, because it is the poorest county in the state and it is the third poorest county in the nation, it is essential for me to make sure that my children learn to read from the birth. They're supposed to be able to read. But as I think about their future, it also allows me to help them, empower them to be, to have self-efficacy. Because if we can teach our children that reading is fundamental and that reading is the passport to freedom, it allows for us to be able to teach them how to be productive citizens and to be able to give back. So there's a phrase that I want you to remember and take with you, that our schools are only as strong as our communities make them. So if we can bond together as a community to make our schools strong, then our children will be able to be productive citizens and give back, and we will continue that cycle, and we'll be able to sustain our communities, especially our rural and impoverished ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shaw, Dr. Sheffield, my next question, as leaders in public education and higher education, how do you see compulsory education today in its functioning? Is it liberation? Is it obligation? Is it both?
Well, I guess I'll start with it. I'm going to say that I see it as both. And the reason that I say that I see it as both is because it requires a shared vision. It is going to require that we all are identified and unified in that purpose in terms of maximizing the opportunities for all of our students and all of our adult learners. And when we come in regards to talking about the liberation piece, that just takes me back in regards to saying that we are developing an educational system to where we're being equitable and making certain that all of our adult learners, all of our student learners have equitable access. And when I come back and I start thinking in regards to, well, I think the second part to your question was, well, is it an obligation? And the reason that I said that it's both is around the obligation piece, because then when I look at the educational system, I'm thinking that the system is required to make certain that they are providing the resources and the opportunities to where we're going to have what we need to make certain that our student learners is getting what is required of us in teaching them and allowing them to leave us with those literacy skills, with those math skills, and just these skills in terms, those soft skills, in terms of just being able to go out there and being productive citizen. I don't think that you're going to be able to go out and do one without the other, because there's nothing we can do in this society without having a shared vision. And I think Dr. Cave just said it, is that if we all come together, we can accomplish so much more. And that is why it is so important that we have both and not one. It's not going to work.
Absolutely. When I read the theme for today's event, freedom to learn, education as liberation, then, now, and next. We have to ensure that every individual who would like an education has the opportunity. There is a movement afoot in our nation that compulsory education would take care of in terms of higher ed. And that notion is that not everybody needs a college education. Now, college, can be defined as both community college as well as 4-year and beyond. We cannot allow a narrative to selectively decide who should go what path. And that is a danger that compulsory education could address in Dr. Sheffield's notion of equity and the right to learn. Education has been the pathway to, to the middle class, to success, etc., and it remains true today. But you can't do it without resources. So it can be compulsory for you to go to school, but if your school cannot provide what you need, then compulsory without equity of resources, included in that programmatic process, it doesn't work. And so, I am a firm believer of compulsory education, but there's a danger in allowing non-educators to determine what is compulsory education. So we must include community, and it must include the wholeness of education. To Superintendent Weaver's point, you gotta know how to read. You definitely have to know how to do math. And we forget about that. We talk about reading. But part of the wealth gap is not knowing your value and not knowing how to negotiate your value in a system that's driven by quantitative skills. So we got to add quantitative skills to reading, because those two, reading, writing, and arithmetic, is still the formula, for compulsory education. Thank you.
Thank you. You've all touched on issues of accessibility and equity. Could I ask you, Drs. Cave and Sheffield, to share your thoughts on what structural barriers continue to limit educational equity in Black communities? And also, what do you see as the greatest opportunities to change that?
Wow. Dr. Cave and I, Hampton County and Allendale, of course, we are neighbors. And when we talk about the barriers there that are within our Black communities, they're in the Low Country. I'm going to share those barriers, but I want to make certain that I am one not to utilize those barriers to make excuses in regards to my students, that they cannot do it, right? But the barriers that we are facing, and just talking in terms of being there in our Black communities, particularly there in Hampton County, is that we have to, where the funding all lies in terms of your tax base and what's coming in with property taxes. And if you do not have that tax base, if you do not have your businesses, your large businesses, or your small businesses are beginning to pull out, there's no job opportunities, so your families are beginning to leave. All that have a tremendous impact in regards to the funding that's coming into your institution of learning. That's a major barrier. I'll start there with the funding. And so when we go on to then start talking about the funding, we have to think about the funding is contributing in regards to high quality instruction materials, being able to recruit and retain high impact teachers, being able to offer those accelerated learning and participating in many that have those fees attached to it, such as College Board. There's a fee. And the list just goes on. But we as leaders, what we have to do, why we are facing these barriers, is to not get complacent and use the barriers as excuses to why nothing can happen. That's why it is so important when we talk about that shared vision and everyone coming together everyone working together. Because if we do so in such great spirit, it's going to allow you to attack some of those barriers while you're continuing to maximize the opportunities for our student learners. Because at the end of the day, it's our job to make certain that they are leaving us and going into this world to where they can be productive citizens, where they can have that freedom of taking care of themselves and their families. And they're only going to be able to do such if we make certain that they have a high quality education and understand what the significance of a portrait of a graduate looks like for the state of South Carolina. We can sit here all day and talk about the barriers and make excuses in regards to why things cannot happen. And while we're doing so, we are losing lives. As I tell my staff all the time, behind those numbers being the data that we are looking at when we are saying that we have still about 40% of our students that are not yet meeting or exceeding in reading. And the number is significant, lower in math. And it goes on. Those numbers represent lives that we are trying to save. As Nelson Mandela says it best, education is the most powerful weapon in saving lives. And that's what keeps us going when we think about the barriers. But even the barriers that we have, there are leaders that are here in this room that are taking the skills that we have. I think you heard with Dr. Taylor being involved in a $100 million, I think, bond referendum. My colleague here, Dr. Rodriguez, have had successful bond referendums. This is what we have to think about in regards to how can we work with our stakeholders, how can we work with the communities, how can we work with our state legislators, our congressional leaders, in getting access to those dollars that we need in our communities that we don't have the tax base.
Diversifying approaches.
Exactly. My babies, they are determined and we are determined. They are entitled to have access to state-of-the-art facilities. We're opening doors to a state-of-the-art high school in August. We still have the challenge of finishing the athletic pieces, but we know it's coming because we are stretching those resources and not making excuses. Thank you to State Superintendent Weaver, not saying that because she's here, but we're able to open up our academic building with state-of-the-art CTE programs because of these relationships. And this is what it's going to take. Just stretching our thinking, diversifying the resources, and making certain our students have those opportunities. But the number one barrier for me, again, is just the lack of resources, but not utilizing the lack of resources as excuses to why we cannot continue looking for ways in providing opportunities for our students.
Dr. Sheffield, your remarks remind us of the urgency around all of this as well. Dr. Cave?
Okay, Dr. Sheffield said it all. And I agree with everything that she said. And because Allendale County, where I serve, is an honor for me because I'm a product of that environment. So it's a personal journey for me to make sure that my students have the resources in order to be successful. So I'm going to go to unmandated funding without the resources and all of the money that makes us able to implement all of the mandates that come from legislature. I understand that they have to make sure that they make rules and procedures and processes that govern our entire state. But along with that, the money needs to come. Because for the community that I serve, well, we have no businesses. Very, very few. So I can't go to those businesses and ask them for additional support because they're struggling themselves in many instances. So regardless of the zip code where children live, regardless of the community that they live in, we need to make sure that we provide those resources. Because all children need to be able to have 4 things that I say all the time. They need to be able to be enrolled in a college, a university, a technical school, whatever they want. It's all about choice. They need to be able to be employed. A college education is not necessary. They also need to be able to be enlisted if they want to. And there's one thing that we often forget with a high school education: they can be the biggest entrepreneur that they want to be. So we have to make sure that we are able to provide those resources. In Allendale, I don't have the new buildings. Superintendent Weaver, not because she's here, like Dr. Sheffield said, she has provided all the resources in her power that she can provide to me. But in my little county, I need to do a bond referendum too, so that my children are able to have those resources to be successful. So when we think of those barriers that we need to move, there are a lot of structural barriers, there are a lot of infrastructure barriers that we need to be able to move for students. But one thing that allows children to be able to be successful is that if we're able to help them redesign their future and not allow where they come from, what they're able to do, to be a barrier for them. Because I believe that with purpose and with hope, all things are possible. My mother taught me something as a young child, and I often say it, and all of my children can say it in my community, in my school, that if a task is once begun, never leave it until it's done. Be a labor great or small, do it well or not at all. So I teach them when we get started with a task, no matter how hard it is, let's complete it, because that's the way to freedom.
Superintendent Weaver, you were sharing a recent visit that you had. Could you share it with our
Absolutely.
visitors today?
I just want to take a moment of personal privilege to say what an honor it is to work with these 2 leaders, and I'm not saying that just because they're here today. Because somebody asked me recently, what is the greatest challenge, or if there was one thing you could fix in education writ large, what would it be? And I said, without a doubt, hands down, adult mindset. Because if we believe our children can, and we provide them the supports, they will achieve. And these 2 ladies here represent the very best of a growth mindset. Between them, they have 2 of the most challenging environments in the entire state, and yet they have given their lives to serve. I call them not Americans, but Americans, because they're getting the job done. And one of our big priorities as a state, my budget request is for infrastructure funding. To help support our schools. And so if you want to reach out to your local lawmakers and tell them to support that budget request this year, I'd be grateful for that. But I did want to share just very quickly a story. I had the privilege about a week ago of being in Lake City with Ron McNair's widow, Cheryl. It's hard to believe that it has been 40 years since the explosion of the Challenger. And I was just reminded at that beautiful ceremony in a school that is named after him and that is carrying on his education legacy, that when he grew up in the Jim Crow South and went to the local library to check out a book, he was told he couldn't. But he stood there and said, "I'll wait." And he did wait, and somebody came along, and guess what? He ended up getting to check out those books. And as a result of that, he went on, despite growing up in a home with no running water, no indoor plumbing, he went on to college in North Carolina. He ended up at MIT, and he became the 2nd African-American astronaut in the NASA program. And so to your point, Dr. Sheffield, I just want to say we acknowledge those barriers. We pledge to fight against those barriers, to overcome them. but we don't use those barriers as an excuse.
Dr. Dillard and actually Superintendent Weaver, I have a question for you about the role of higher ed, historically black colleges and universities. How do HBCUs and historically black school systems remain relevant today, revolutionary today, in this current educational landscape?
I will tell you, it is tough. But we're doing it every single day. And that is happening because curriculums are being upgraded, the cultural atmosphere, for students allows them to express all the amazing things, that they can do. Again, just like public school, funding is a challenge for historically black colleges and universities. But having a can-do attitude, my mantra, what I say to other people, is if newly freed Africans could build these institutions coming out of slavery with no wealth, no land, no anything, they built them and they have stood for over 160 plus years. We can do whatever we put our minds to do, but you got to do it. You got to be about getting it done. And we got to quit with the mentality, as Dr. Sheffield said, of these are barriers, therefore I'm making excuses for our inability to do. I want to share a couple of things about historically black colleges and universities that may not be appreciated always. We have always admitted anyone who wanted a college education. Very few of our schools are 100% black. And so we have been able to demonstrate that we're not less than, but we've been open to everyone. And as a result of that, what we have been able to achieve as historically black colleges and universities has been phenomenal when you think about how we were founded. And I'm gonna talk to the audience now. Y'all love your HBCUs, you put your stuff on, you show up at homecoming, divine nine-stepping. We do all of that. And we've got more wealth today than we have ever had. But the giving back to those institutions that allowed you to rep them, in such an amazing way is not happening, folks. And you have read the statistics about even the land grant HBCUs. You have federally mandated money that was never given to these institutions, like South Carolina State, because it was blocked at the state level. So we have to be careful about compulsory without holding accountability. But these institutions have been around 160 years because, as Dr. Cade said, it's been about community. You have wanted us to succeed. Right. Now, another thing that you may not know about our schools is that the majority of the students that come, in a lot of cases, come from under-resourced school systems. So they don't come in the freshman class being necessarily college ready. And we charge the same tuition for college ready as college not ready. And so therefore, we have to use the limited funds to bring them up to where they can be, because they all have potential to do. You just have to invest in that potential. The United Negro College Fund calls it punching above our weight. We take you where you are, and that's what we've always done, and then bring you to where we know you can be. That's right. And if you think about Thurgood Marshall, Dr. Martin Luther King, Ella Baker, all of those, they came out of these institutions that, if you describe them, you could call them almost like Hampton and Allendale County, because they're resource constrained. But they continue to produce more black doctors, engineers, teachers, lawyers, than all the other institutions put together, and we're only 3%. But those are not restricted to just black kids. Any kid that wants to come to Shaw University or any other HBCU can come and get that same kind of treatment. But to be relevant, which is the basis of your question, sorry it's taken me so long to get there, how do we stay relevant? You know, I don't know many people that get asked every day, why do we still need historically black colleges and universities? We're asked that people can go anywhere they want to go, and we're already funding these other institutions. Why do we still need historically black colleges and universities? Because we do what these two educators do. We take them where they are, and we get them to where they need to be. And we fix them when they get damaged at other places. So we're still relevant. But the other thing that is so important is to be revolutionary. And when people ask me about my education, I attended, as you heard, 3 historically black colleges and universities. And, you know, our mantra is also, you know, if you don't have it, you figure out a way to get it done. When I was a biology student, I couldn't order stuff from, you know, the scientific houses. We had to figure out how to get it done without it. And so therefore, when I was placed in environments that were, you know, challenging, you know, we used to make it a way. And so I think that we are revolutionary and innovative always, because that has been the way we have survived for many, many years. So we're looking at curriculum. We've got HBCUs, you know, with aviation, drone technology, cybersecurity. We are trying to make sure that our institutions continue to offer what is needed for the success of individuals. And we don't have any problems, folks, especially my HBC alumni. We don't have any problems that money won't solve. So when you leave here, you know, help South Carolina State go to Carnegie Hall. If you haven't given to your HBCU, please do that. Because if newly freed individuals and the things that were recognized in Mitchellville happen today, not a single one of our institutions will have a problem. So you're the key, to keeping the momentum going. And we have a responsibility to keep our eyes on the environment and to make sure that our curriculums are relevant. It's not our schools that are relevant. It's our curriculum, you know, our ability to advance students, and student learning outcomes has to be the measure, of our institutions. So we have to work with our public school systems to make sure that, we are partners. Because I'm gonna tell you now, we can no longer do education work in a silo. We have to have lots of partners. And like Dr. Cave said, they don't have big business here to help them do that. When you don't have that, you gotta find another set of partners. So you gotta find partners and collaborators. The other thing is, you gotta recognize that if families are suffering, students are not gonna be successful. If they're housing insecure, etc. And other folks get a cold, we get pneumonia. We got to figure out a way of making it work for the family, the community. Our schools were founded in communities that depended on each other to do everything. And we got to get back to that. And so we got to take care of our community, and then we get the support to take care of those that we're entrusted to educate. Thank you.
There is very little I can add to that except two specific pieces of South Carolina context. So the first, Bethune-Cookman University. It may be in Florida, but let us not forget that Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune was from South Carolina. She was from Sumter County, and I'm just going to tell you, it chaps me a little bit that as the first African woman statue up in the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., it says Florida on the base of her statue instead of South Carolina. So I just want to put that stakeholder out there. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune is from South Carolina. Okay.
And she graduated from Barber Scotia,
yeah.
My alma mater.
There you go. There you go. But what I'll say about thinking about the relevance of HBCUs here in South Carolina going into the future, one very concrete example is our own Voorhees. So Voorhees has actually launched an authorizer to become a statewide authorizer of public charter schools. And as I think about the innovation that is happening in our education systems, that is certainly part of the education ecosystem. And so Voorhees is stepping up, is seeing a new vision for the future, and answering that call. So to me, our HBCUs in South Carolina, just one example of how they continue to be relevant into the future.
And just adding on to that, many of our schools have become early college and even earlier than that. And so now you have coexisting on HBCU campuses from, we have an early child at Shaw University, we have pre-K, and we also have an early college. And now we're looking at maybe we need to fill in the rest of it. And now you got a complete pathway, through the educational process, and we have a very active adult degree program. So what do you have there? A learning continuum. Mm-hmm. And you're able to provide, through the work that's being done. And there is amazing work going on in all of our HBCUs around STEM, around charter schools, around a number of avenues, because we just don't know how to do anything else.
I'm sorry. It's one thing to have leadership sitting on a platform, but to bring the personal experience, the depth of knowledge, the expertise, the national reach, and the groundedness in community is really quite exceptional, I guess, and it's blowing me away a little bit here. Actually, Dr. Dillard and actually Dr. Sheffield, I wanted to ask you about how your personal identities have shaped your leadership, in that, could you describe just briefly how that's influenced how you lead, what you lead, and your responsibility, if any, that you feel to those who come behind you?
My personal identification in regards to how I lead in this space and why I am so passionate about it, it just it takes me back in regards to how I even led myself into education. And I have to tell you, I got into education coming into this space because of an encounter that I had with my teacher. And as one will say, a student may never remember anything you taught them, but they will always remember how you made me feel. And I just remember, as a first generation college student, I'll start there, but then I go back and just remember my days and being born to a parent that was a senior in high school. And back in the 60s, you could not go to school being pregnant, so my mom had to stop her senior year. And she did go back and finish. But needless to say, I had encountered a teacher that taught my mom, so she knew my mother's circumstances. And she taught me when I was a senior in high school. And to this day, I still remembered when that teacher asked the question to myself, to my classmates, and said, what do you want to do when you graduate? And I remember going around the room, and when she got to me, and she said to me, when I said that I wanted to go away to college, and to this day, I remember vividly she said to me, I don't know what you're talking about, you're not going to be anything. So, back then, there was no such thing as mental health counselors. There was no such thing as the landscape for guidance counselors were different. So the support that we can provide to our students now were not available to me. There was no such thing. At that moment, I got in a dark space and really started believing that I couldn't do it, that I could not be anything, and that I was wasting my time. And it took another teacher to pull me out of that dark space and to help me realize that there are some good teachers out there and that everyone don't feel this way about you, that you can be somebody, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of where you came from, regardless of you being that young lady, a little girl that wore the same thing to school, probably 3 days out of the 5. I probably went to school with your hair not combed because your grandparents was raising you. It took me some time to get out of there, but it was my sophomore year in college when I was still enduring the hurt, the pain, and the anguish and the trauma of what took place in that classroom, to where I had a turning point that said, you know what? I'm going to change my major. I'm going into education. I want to help and try to prevent any other student from having to endure the hurt, the pain, and the suffering that I endured at the hands of that teacher. And to this day, that is how I lead. I lead with a heart. I lead with a passion. I lead of wanting to do right by all children. I'm wanting to make certain that all students have equitable access, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their home life. And if they do not have it, then it's my job to work with my teachers, my staff, and my community, and having that sense of efficacy and pride and understanding that all students that we encounter in our space have a place and have and should have an opportunity to go out and be someone. So I always say to my staff, and I'll say here, forget about me being a superintendent. That's just the title. At the end of the day, when I show up as a parent, and I said as a parent first, because I knew how I fought for my own 2 personal children. And I promise God that as hard as I fought for my own 2 personal children, that I will fight as hard or even harder for every child that he placed in my space of having been accountable for. So I always say, if it's not good enough for mine, then it's not good enough for the one that I'm in charge of providing an educational for. So that's why I fight hard and long every single day, and I vow that. And I say that when I lose the fire of fighting, I know it's time to go home. So as we build this new opportunity there for my students to enter their campus there come August, their academic building, I'm fighting. I'm fighting for us to be able to finish phase 2 because they are entitled to it. I'm also fighting where we have those empty spaces, and we talked about those barriers earlier. What can I do about those barriers? If I have the empty classroom spaces, why not I work with my community? Remember we talked about a shared vision, and we all coming together and collaborate in a spirit of doing what's right? Then why can I not collaborate, which I am collaborating, of starting an early college on that campus to where my students have access during the instructional day to where they do not have to leave campus to go to USC Salk, USC Beaufort, or to TCL. The opportunity is right there for them in that early campus wing. All of my babies, parents cannot come and pick them up and drive them to those opportunities. Their parents cannot afford the transportation, providing them their own personal vehicles to get them there. So I'm bringing the opportunity to them because those opportunities were not provided to me. That's my purpose, and that's my why.
What a compelling story. Mine is not nearly that dramatic. I'm going to date myself. My first 11 years of high school, of education, were in a segregated black school. On my 12th year was mandatory busing. And so every student in the county that was African American were bused from wherever you lived to this one school that started from first grade, through 12th grade. So therefore, when we had mandatory busing, that meant we were all divided up and sent through to whatever school was in our particular closest district. Now, having gone to that school from 1 to 11, we've been told all our lives we could do anything we wanted to do, so we were kind of bullish about, well, this is not going to be any different because we got this notion from our instructors that we were as good as anybody, even though we had secondhand books and all of that. They had convinced us that we were the best thing since, sliced bread. So we get bused to these schools. I'm at a county school. There are 200 students in my graduating class, and of that 200, 6 of us were African Americans that came from the black school. I messed around, didn't know no better. I was an honor graduate. I was third runner-up for Miss High School. I'm acting like, we're fine, because that is what was, instilled in me. And, did I have challenges? Yeah, did they throw rocks? But because of that experience of teachers who cared about me, they had convinced this little black girl that she could do anything she wanted to do. So, got through high school, graduated, like I said, had an honor cord around my neck, and my mama was scared I was going to get killed every day because it was a hostile environment. But I say all of that to say, had I not been grounded by a bunch of folk who kept telling us every day that we could taught us our history. And so that is how I lead, because I believe what you expect of people is what you're gonna get. You know, and so I continue that, you know, mantra. Every HBCU I attended was like going back to those 1 through 11 grade, because they continued to lift me up. And then when I went, education is my second career. I was in healthcare and research for about 25 years. You know, had to fight the battles there. And so I came to education to tell a story. Little black girl, Andy Griffith's hometown, Mount Airy, North Carolina, where I grew up. Yeah, there were some of us in that city. And, you know, and so, you know, so to come back to an historically black college, having graduated from 3, you know, had stellar opportunities, I came back because I want to tell them the story of, doesn't matter where you come from. It's what you believe about yourself and having the support system around you. And that is what we do. And that is what we must preserve. And that's what we must continue to demand, you know, equal and adequate funding to protect. And I will continue this fight until, you know, until I can't do it anymore. Because I am a product. And Mary McLeod Bethune is my, yeah, I do everything the way Mary does it. You know, and I was honored to be given the Bethune-Heights Leadership Award a few years ago, because I believe that what she did is what we ought to do, you know, and they did it under circumstances much tougher than what we're faced with. So you're not going to hear me whining and crying. I'm going to be fighting and telling you, well, what'd you do about it? Instead of you keep telling me, yeah, all of this stuff, what you doing? Yeah, and so that is how I lead, because of the gift of what was given to me, you know, by, you know, my community. And I will tell you, they were not all right. I had white instructors that poured into me the same way, because they believed Superintendent Weaver in children. It didn't matter what color they were. So that's how I lead, you know, and that's how, you know, I fight, and I will continue to do that as long as God gives me the strength and the ability to do that. Thank you very much.
I have one more, I'll call it focused question for 2 of you before I call on each of you to respond to a question that actually involves our audience today as well. So, Dr. Cave and Superintendent Weaver, looking towards the future, if Mitchellville's founders were designing an education system for today's children, what do you believe they would insist on?
I believe that they were designing an educational system for the future. They wanted to be practical. They wanted to be humane. They would want it to be very liberating for people. They wanted it to be about self-governance for them, so that children could have the choices to go the pathways that they so desire. I think that they would want children to be able to design their future. While purpose and hope are really important for all children, I believe that they would want the community to be heavily involved in that redesign for what a future school would look like. It would be one where they would have financial literacy, because we often talk about them having the resources and making sure that they know how to read and they know math. But if we could do something for our communities, and that's to teach our children about personal finance, because being able to have financial literacy allows them to build a successful future. And I believe the Mitchellville community was all about that. Them being able to have self-governance and design a future and design an education that would allow them to create a pathway for success for themselves.
I love that. And Dr. Cave, since you talked about the future, I'll talk about the corollary to that. And I think that what the founders of Mitchellville would want students today to do is to know their history. And I can't think of a more fitting place to talk about that than here at Mitchellville. And we actually are very privileged today. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, we have our South Carolina State Teacher of the Year in the room with us today, Mr. Corey Bedenbow. And he has actually dedicated his life not only to history, but to teaching history to middle school students. So that man is a champion, let me tell you what. But I wanted to just speak briefly on the history piece to something that, as we talk about resource barriers, something that we're trying to do at the Department of Education is do everything we can to create free resources that are available to every community in our state. And one of those projects that we've been working on is what we call the Palmetto Pioneers. And so if you go to palmettocivicsproject.com, you can actually download posters. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune was our very first Palmetto Pioneer, and that's actually why I was in Lake City, because Dr. Ronald McNair is also one of our Palmetto Pioneers. But I can't wait to surface a story from here in Mitchellville that we can add to our collection of Palmetto Pioneers. And what I love about this poster series is that it's not just about the history. It also adds in another layer, which is character. And that's the second thing that I think that the founders of Mitchellville would want our students to have today. We can call it soft skills, we can call it life skills, we can call it durable skills. It's the skills that you have to have in order to be not only a successful student, but a successful human being. And so those characters of honesty, integrity, patriotism, courage, the things that we want all of our students to have, and the things that the founders of Mitchellville exemplified so beautifully, I think is what they would want our students today to know.
Thank you. My final question, and actually I would like this from each of you. If you can identify a single thing, a single action, one action, whether it's a policy-driven action, community-based or personal action, that our audiences today can take that would honor Mitchellville's educational legacy beyond today.
You want to start down here? We'll just go down the row. How about that? All right. I think that the most important action that any of us can take, we talked earlier about that important action of writing checks, right? You got to write the check. But the most important resource, the most valuable resource that any of us have is our time. And so my encouragement to you is to give your time. Find out how you can become a literacy tutor in your local school district. Find out how you can work with the Boys and Girls Club to be a mentor. As you heard Dr. Sheffield tell us, sometimes those students just need somebody to love them. How can you take personal responsibility for a student or for multiple students in your community? Because that's how we not only show our students that we love them, that's how we have our teachers' backs. We've asked our teachers to be everything to everybody, and the fact is our teachers can't replace the community, and they can't replace the love of the community. So that's my encouragement to you today. Figure out how to become a mentor or a tutor in your community.
I would add to that, that's very important, and I agree 100%. And I know I'm going to agree with everything Dr. Cave says and Dr. Sheffield after me. But I want to bring up something that I'm not sure we know how important it is, and that is advocacy. The way that you can help, there are so many potential laws and proposals, etc., that are being floated, and if we don't have a mechanism, and maybe it's town halls, it's our public schools, our HBCUs, our universities, we've got to have a mechanism where we talk about, so that everybody understands what will be the impact of that law, of that proposal, if it becomes law. And we don't do enough of that. And when we go to the polls, which is our single most important, asset that we have, we go and we just, I don't know nothing about him, I just checked this one, and there are laws, there's so many things that are out there that we have the power, to make a difference, to actually improve them, modify them, but that takes feedback. So I would like to have you in your communities and all over wherever you're from, how can you go about becoming more involved and advocating for the things that the people that you have put in place that are telling you what is needed, and when there is something that is anti that, your voice sometimes is the only thing that will help us make the difference. We got a lot of things that we're facing in terms of who gets federal funding to go to school. We've never had to have somebody else decide that for us. These are all potential laws on the books that are being negotiated. So I'm looking at ways that we can create more informed communities so that you can join with us in advocating in the best interest of the constituency. And I'm talking about the elderly, I'm talking about the schools. It all runs together. So we've got to learn to be better advocates. And then when we are, you got to get civic minded. This stuff, when it gets to us for implementation, there's not much that can be done about it. So I would say, if you're not an advocate for what you care about and believe in, be one, start now. Thank you.
So mine goes right along with theirs, but it's about empowerment. Empower someone else to be successful. Make sure that you are able to give kindness. Say something kind to someone. You never know what you say. It might change that person's life. So I remember this about Martin Luther King. What was his favorite song? If I can help somebody along the way, then my living will not be in vain. I want that to be each person in here, that you have helped somebody. At the end of the day, when I go home, I want to make sure that I can say, what have I done for someone else? It's not about me. So if you can empower someone, if you can be a servant leader, then you've done your duty as a citizen. So remember, every day, empower someone else to be successful. Say something kind. Give a word of encouragement. If you can't give money, give a word of encouragement. You know how they say, pay it forward? You can pay it forward with a kind word or a kind deed. So make sure that you're able to give something back that way.
And my colleagues have said it all, but I will, of course, leave you with the 3 E's that we embraced for Hampton County School District. And those 3 E's are to engage yourself, empower yourself and each other, and more importantly, to educate those that you may come in contact with in regards to the benefit of being great.
Thank you all. I just want to close by saying that Freedom Day here at Mitchellville does remind us, hopefully you've heard from these servant leaders who are activists as well, that freedom and education have always been about dignity, about power, about self-determination in a community-driven, community collaborative way. And I hope that we all leave here today committed to protecting those values and that vision. And please join me in, again, applauding our incredible panel. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Mack.
Thank you, Superintendent Weaver. And before you leave, we just want to reiterate what they asked you all to do as they were closing. Superintendent Weaver asked that you give your time. Dr. Dillard asked that you be an advocate. Dr. Cave asked that you empower someone else to be kind, and she left us with a song that's dear to her. If I can help someone along the way, then my living won't be in vain. And Dr. Sheffield sharing with us the mantra of Hampton County School District: to engage, to empower, and to educate.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. I hope you were enriched by that as much as I was. I want to thank you, Dr. Sheffield, Dr. Cave, Dr. Dillard, Dr. Weaver, Dr. Mack, Dr. Taylor, all these doctors up here. I am not a doctor. I appreciate your efforts. I gotta say, Dr. Dillard got thrown a curveball a couple of days ago and could have very easily said, I can't make it. And some things that she had to take care of at her institution, and she came anyway. And I want to just thank you for doing that under the circumstances. This has been a powerful day. I got a couple of thank yous, then we get you out there. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Again, I want to thank our friends at the town of Hilton Head for helping us to do things like this and having representation here. I want to thank our board of directors. We had some board members and some former board members that were here. Thank you. Wave your hand, board members, former board members. Thank you. We appreciate you. And I want to thank the team. I get a chance to stand in front of you and say, you know, this is great, but I can't do any of this without the squad. And so, Joyce, come up from behind there. Come out from behind there, Joyce. Joyce Wright is our Director of Programs and Interpretation, and she makes sure that every program is top-notch. Every program. And so thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Caitlin Lee from Foresight Communications, Marketing, Nate Bearden, Youth Programs Coordinator, Katie Sieber, our archaeologist, had the things out there for us today. Heather Rath, who is part of this Mitchellville family as well, for doing all the things that you do to make sure that we are moving on all cylinders. Gustavo, always making us look good. The South Carolina State University Choir. Man, oh man. If you are interested in helping them, we do have some of those sponsorship envelopes on the Mitchellville table when you leave. Please stop by and grab one of those. I'm doing something that most nonprofit folks don't do often, Dr. Mack. I'm helping somebody else get some money on my property. With that, thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time here at Historic Mitchellville Freedom Park.